I was hoping that we could definitely make today a really like workshop time. Like you can go away with at least one thing that you can immediately implement, and then maybe some frameworks or ways of thinking about designing a much larger course. This site, if you get to it, there should be a link at the bottom that says workshop slides. So you are welcome to, you'll have all the slides. You can work through it. They have hyperlinks too for when we get into kind of more OER stuff. So definitely pull it up if you can.
One thing I'd like to learn during this workshop is how to find open science resources. You know, the Allen Institute has a lot of cool things if you're doing cell sciences or neuro, immunology, but for other topics, is there a good way to search for that kind of thing so that you can try to use it in other types of courses?
Yes, there is. Yep. And if we get to it, I think we'll definitely get to that in the second hour. Great, thank you for sure. Anything else? Any other special requests? Oh yeah.
So I teach an upper division cell biology course, but we don't have any prep person or a staff person to assist with prep. So that all falls on me, and I find that sometimes I get too ambitious and then I'm overwhelmed with the prep. So I guess thinking about how to do something meaningful for the students, but involve them in the prep so they see part of that part of the science as well.
Ooh, oh, that's such a good idea. Yeah, we can talk about that because I've tried to. One of the things I learned from my son neuro is that they are not great. Having them prep the solutions and the buffers is really challenging.
The students.
Yes, like shockingly.
Lots of bad things.
But yeah, we can totally discuss that as well. Yeah. Okay, I think so. What I was hoping to do today is I wanted to just sort of walk us through a set of frameworks or questions, questions that we can ask ourselves as we are beginning to design a course. And it was really funny when Sam Donovan was giving his talk and he was like, these days people seem to be doing like diversity and inclusion as like the first thing. You know, his slides with the 3 arrows. And I kind of do think of, I guess I was like, oh my God, I'm one of the like young people that do that first. I think let's start with our values. So I'll be walking you through just a set of questions. They're timed. There's moments for you to work together. You can see the time up here. That's sort of what I've allotted. And then this is like how much time you have to do that. And then how much time you'll have to share out. If you are kind of a group processor, feel free to talk with each other during the thinking time. If that's not you, feel free to, and we'll all know that's what you're doing, and that's totally fine. But let's start with values. So what values are important in your classroom? As you're thinking of these courses that you've been working on, or that you have in mind, that you love and some aspects you don't love, what are some critical values in the classroom? And that's not exactly the same thing as learning goals. For me, for example, I mentioned that this notion of creating an environment where learners have agency is really, really important. And that is one of the reasons why I liked Notion for my lab notebook. It's that, you know, you can use that on a phone, you can use that on your iPad, you can use it on a laptop, you can use it as an app or a browser. And I was chatting with Noah Courtney yesterday, who was like, I'm still like a pen and pencil guy. And the cool thing about Notion is that it actually formats itself automatically really well to be printed out. I actually found it first because I used it for my lab protocols, so the students could see that on their iPads or whatever they're using these days. And when they printed it out so that they didn't bleed on their iPads when they were doing perfusions, right? That was perfect. And that's one of the things where, for access, right, in learner agency, it's having multiple ways of getting to knowledge. All sorts, maximizing, sorry, I don't know where that is. But one of these things is about having multiple ways to perceive information to display the information, or to represent a diversity of perspectives and identities, which is why in my lab notebook, I have asked permission for my lab students to actually be the people that are featured in the photos as examples. So all that together, not just because Notion is cool, but because it was one of the ways that it could manifest one of the values. So what are your values? It doesn't have to be these. This is just my little example. What values are important in your classroom? Feel free to chat with each other, discuss, and I'll let you know when we've got about 2 minutes left. Like that I mentioned. So that one has to be a learning. So we're all in the mind. It's awesome. That questions are good. Like communication.
Mostly us like going out.
Yeah. Students ready to learn things. Yeah, it's like, you know, they have to really resist. You can think individual. I too was not trained in pedagogy. So I learned
In people, exactly this.
Yeah.
So you'll see a lot of like. Yeah, like, I agree with that. I haven't said this one. Yeah. Okay. And there are a couple of others that.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing that is clearly.
Yeah.
How they do.
Like how they think about it.
I like that. So like, I don't care what this.
So, I don't know, I don't know how to.
Like, trying to get where they are, like, that's the one.
To see how
One is like a trial that was or whatever. Like, yeah, and I feel right. And 3 was like a pastoral. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Thanks for letting me speak.
The topic that the other places in the country.
It's a strange room.
Blah, blah, blah. And I think it helps. So it's understanding what each is like. Me as an instructor, a little bit.
Class where I'm sort of worrying about my kids.
Definitely have this knowledge, and also at that point, there's split. So there's not as.
So like, I think, yeah, I'd say like, it's good to dealing with you guys, you know, we like to do them all that stuff. There's questions that you have to know, to demonstrate, then we can try to find answers.
Yeah.
The little things where you're hearing.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, got it. I only saw this as something.
Yeah.
Science, you're stepping out into their room.
I don't think, yeah. No, and these are kind of like this, like, this.
Yeah. Does people, you need to ask this question.
Like, yeah, no, that's not. It's so
Where-
Yeah.
Good luck with that. Good luck with that, your anatomy class.
You know,
And so it's sort of,
That is environment.
And then asking for feedback, ideas, trying to improve it.
yeah, so I mean, it's like,
I agree, disagree.
Oh,
In the context of biology, right? Like, it would not be math, I don't think
like,
math.
it's like not force eval unless they're meant to be So, but I, obviously we didn't do
But I
that.
also when you do it, maybe it's by interclass.
Very important to you and for future course.
Yeah. So anyway, clearly a lot of users exist.
The advice is great.
Start bio yourself. You're off. I love it. Yeah, we need that one. Certainly by the time you're seniors, it's oh, I love this, having something really set up.
They're on your notes, deliverable, prep further, big groups of two. We have
Yeah, no, I really like. So I'm struggling, I'm really struggling with like this.
We're all already sharing with each other. If you haven't.
Yeah. In about 3 minutes, I think what I'll ask is I'll ask you to kind of shout out something that another group member of yours shared that you really appreciated. So take these 3 minutes to also ask them if that's okay. That way we can promote individual and collective reflection, develop awareness of self, also build fluencies. Okay, so take about 3 minutes.
Computer started to cram and all like that.
So I'm hoping that energy without. Yes. That's exactly. You need I'm sorry.
Emotional lab.
I guess I want to start with just a couple of. I was gonna say. Collaboration. Yes. Yeah, there's one. In like maybe. I thought that before. That's great. I have the skills to find some. I've made videos with these values, and I mean, so I think I tried it. Search for the answer, then they make it up. You're not going to be an expert. You're sometimes always ask you for put in for.
Yeah.
It's like, I have 14 years or 10 years of in lab experience, right? Like working giving them time to actually expected to do, and like you said, was the method of science, because a lot of people just look at it, oh, do I need to debug this and then find an A in this class, which a lot of the times is like, the thing just bugged out on its own. It has nothing to do with it. First day with like ground.
I don't know if that's just like a.
Right.
A lot of,
And I actually ground rules.
set
Oh, but if that's not.
Yeah, for you, and we were living by them for our
Independent research.
Yeah, I
Also, I mean, not trying to be where they think they're
you guys can see at least what it was like to do that without.
But what it does
In previous classes.
how do you, what is this happening?
We're like, I was able to provide an issue.
Yeah, it's an actual React.
Yeah.
They're always.
No, I've always spoken. You see your students
Right. Before we get to sharing, I'll just let y'all know, I did build in like a little 5-10 minute break. So you can go do whatever you want. Okay, anyone want to share or shout out something from their group that they really loved, the value that was important?
Oh, I was just had it out, sorry. Yeah, just the idea that, you know, everyone is learning together, right? Especially when you're teaching science, like nobody knows everything on a given topic ever. And so, yeah, just the idea that it's a learning community, you can find answers together. You know, students have the ability to do that as well as the instructor. You know, you have kind of the power to answer your own questions. Yeah, to get comfortable in that space of like not knowing.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hearing there's like a value that means two things for you. One is that your value is kind of like we all do science together, which has meant like sort of collapsing hierarchies and also working collaboratively. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Other folks?
Something we've started doing in our intro labs in the last year is sort of assigning people randomly every week to a new team, which I was always really reluctant to do. That's like my worst nightmare. And so I thought for many people that it would really be problematic, but it's surprising to me how much students actually like it, because otherwise you have these small cliques. It's like, you know, you've got the little group that's always in, and you've got somebody who never has a partner, or and just randomizing that experience. Students report back that they felt like they really had a chance to get to know everyone in the class, and that it became a really strong collaborative cohort across the entire lab. So that's something that I know that I thought would not promote inclusivity in some way, but it really does, and it kind of helps with a lot of the important values in universal design.
Okay, yeah, like the value there is like inclusivity or creating some kind of structure where students can sort of encounter each other more, or building social relationships. Yep. Ashley?
Yeah, Pasha said that for their course, they really tried to make it so students felt comfortable asking questions and also making mistakes in front of other students and in front of the instructor.
Okay. Making mistakes. What do you feel like is the value there?
For me, it's like a coding course, which is all about making mistakes, because you run something, it doesn't work, like you don't capitalize or you add an extra space, and like students will run into this and they'll be like, I don't know what's wrong, and I'm like usually walk them through like trying different things with the code, and that makes them both like a better coder because they learn what the actual like the right syntax is, and it also teaches them that in order to code you have to like troubleshoot and run things many times to try to figure out what's wrong, try different things.
Yeah.
That like helps you organically solve the problem, because you're like, okay, what if I capitalize instead of not?
It's important in wet lab courses also, because students often come with the mindset that if things don't work, it means I'm not a good scientist. I can be a good scientist, and you really want to foster the opposite, that things fail in science all the time, and you troubleshoot, you keep going, you try to go from a different angle, whatever, you keep at it. It doesn't mean you're not a good scientist just because your experiment didn't turn out the way you wanted it to.
Yeah, that we like are people that are intrinsically worthwhile in spite of, or maybe in conjunction with, mistakes or unpredictable things. Totally. Anything else for folks? All right, Jackie kind of had like a,
I know.
but then
I'm like, is it a value? Because I had asked permission about sharing. So one thing Robin does is she does a team building exercise in her class, where in a lab class where students are working in teams. She does a team building exercise at the start of the class, and as soon as I heard it, I was like, of course. Why have I never done that? But then I'm like, what's the value? Like, and there's a lot of values, I guess, tied into that, in terms of maybe trust within your group, or like agency, or everyone participating. So I guess that.
yeah.
So yeah, that was what, that was the middle brow for,
Yeah. Well, Robin, what's the value that that manifests for you?
I think it all comes down to how important we each are, valuing each other. So we form teams so that we get to know each other, all of the strengths that we bring to the table. I watched a great TED Talk years ago about teaming, and how that you're strongest if you look to the person next to you and immediately figure out what are their biggest strengths that they're bringing. And so I think it really comes down to valuing each person and the strengths that they're bringing so we can get together.
We also find that practice like really sort of inclusive of, say, different folks from different cultures, like in a culturally diverse space or in a folks with neurodivergence of some kind, because I think it's really, we don't realize that we make all sorts of cultural assumptions about what makes people a good teammate. And then when they don't do it, we're kind of like, okay. But having a chance to just talk about how we want to work together makes a lot of things explicit, like social rules of being part of a team, which may or may not be part of, you know, like neurodivergent culture or whatever other non-US culture. Yeah, for sure. Okay, we'll keep going. No, we're doing great. Okay, so I think it's really great too that the other thing we talk about is who are our students. Someone mentioned that a major impediment is that we don't have a prep staff. I think I asked about that too, right? Like who's helping? Did I put that? Oh, sorry, I deleted it. But thinking about who's helping, who's there to support you all, who are the students? So what's your teaching context? Class size, meeting frequency, those are sort of easier things that we typically think about. Things that I think are really useful to also think about are what commitments do your students have outside of the class? That could be other courses. I think organic chemistry is basically my enemy. Do they have paid work? Or do they have athletic commitments, any child or family care, things like that? And then also what kind of identities or patterns of socialization might show up in your class or might be missing, right? Like, how come this is not, like, who's missing here? Good questions to ask. So who are your students? And because we are such a lovely, chatty group, time-wise, let's do 5 minutes if you want to sort of kind of on your own reflect. And then I'll just have 5 minutes where we'll share with each other. So we won't necessarily hear in the, okay, go for it. Who are your students?
all right, y'all, come on back, let's get started again.
I saw somebody waiting for the bus to get her help.
Yeah, poster in their
Okay, folks. Yeah, let's get back started.
Listening to my playlist from Spotify today. Okay. So hopefully we got all the thirst and bathroomy, check emails, check text feelings out. I like to give lots of breaks to my students. The students have said they appreciate that. I'm always like, you know, go ahead, take a break. Check your phones, see if that hottie you met on Thursday texted you back. But they told me that they don't do that anymore. But let's get back to it. This next little session, I think it's just going to be a lot of like workshop time. I'm sharing on this left-hand side some of the features of a like intensive research experience that I wanted to be part of my lab with, which is 3 hours once a week for 15 weeks. And they're just examples for things that I'm wondering what features or elements you want in your course, this thing that you had in mind when we started today. And features / elements, what do you want to add / change? Like what's coming up for you? And again, this isn't necessarily going to be content goals or even learning goals. I'm sort of thinking a little bit more at that metacognitive level, right? Where, you know, it's not necessarily like, I'm not like, oh, I want them to know the zebra finch birdsong system. But I do want them to know how to engage with a new tool with minimal instruction, for example. So take a little bit of time to think about it. And I think today would be helpful to just focus on one of those to workshop through an OER. Let's do, yeah, I mean, you all have been very conversational. If that is a pattern you'd like to keep going, then why don't we do sort of like 10 minutes where you are chatting with each other about some features? So I have built in lots of time to really workshop and do things. Let me get a vibe check though. Yeah. Want to go spend like 20, 25 minutes really exploring some OERs, ways to be.
That's where that picture that they keep on showing is so much more.
Great. We'll make the. Okay. So,
I'm showing my three circles of like this is like budget, and there's like the really complex work that they're showing, but yeah, also they said straight up, you know, you'll have to talk.
So before we get into that, what were some things that came up in features, elements that you wanted to be part of your course?
And then you're not gonna get.
sorry, am I really very, very difficult to hear? Very quiet.
This hasn't been.
The acoustics, I've got a hearing aid and the acoustics in this room are terrible.
Oh,
Just
okay.
you.
And there's a little bit of that.
Yeah, there's something, yeah.
Well, let's, what's a good way to get, could I make like an alarm go off if I need your attention?
Yes, sure.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what were some things that came up for folks? Anyone want to share some things? What came up? What things were featured? What features? What things did you want to change?
I'd like to add a lesson with just some simple coding where students would go use a public database and make some graphs, for instance.
Okay, so like using coding to
Yeah,
make the
yeah,
graph.
just simple graphs, you know, like X versus Y.
Yeah, okay.
Just to give them an opportunity to code, but not overwhelm them, but be exploring some of the data that's part of the course.
Yeah, that's a great one. And there is actually an expert in the room. And they actually have some OERs for that.
Yeah, I was in her workshop.
Oh,
Struggling with the coding.
You did it though.
We talked about peer review and how it's so valuable and how it helps students in an intermediate step where they have to revise things and the challenges around revision. We talked about how parents, students, and like the data
Yeah. So then is the goal to find an OER that teaches students how to give answers? I've never seen that, and that would be really awesome. Yeah, please report back on that. Yeah. That would be good. Anyone else?
We talked about some strategies for like teaching students how to code. We discussed pair programming and like the strengths and weaknesses of that. Like yeah, it has pros and cons. Like it could maybe help you learn better. Like maybe it could help like pair stronger and weaker students together. But like that could also run into issues. What else? Oh, and pseudocode, which is just like a good way to prepare yourself to code and know what your code is supposed to be doing. Just like the first step.
Ways to teach students best laboratory practices. So maybe an experiment or a couple experiments that use good laboratory technique, bad laboratory technique, compare the results. See that it's important the way they do this.
Really. That where they do the bad ones. They feel like so much of what we teach them is like to do it the right way, but we don't. Yeah. So I have seen it where and the students have to do the different steps that they're trying to run it down. And it's very specific, extremely precise. Like they have to do, like open this before they and then put the lid on before they pipette. Yeah. But it does not let them, mess up. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Oh, yeah.
I'll mention that Cubes, the cubeshub.org has a couple of several of OERs, numerous OERs, but one of them is on teamwork and providing feedback, project leadership.
All right, and let me give a few sort of comments and introductions to things. When I first heard who we are, much of what I thought it was just textbooks that were free. And that is certainly no longer the case, although it is still true that there are many like open access textbooks now. A couple of these that I'm giving, the ones that I'm showing you are actually more databases. So they're not individual OERs per se, but they're databases that have a lot of really, really cool search abilities. Let's go to Cubes. This is a great one. And I love it because you can sort by activity length. Not showing up on the screen. Oh, share this tab instead. Okay, so it goes by activity length. Thank you. What software you can use, and you can see that it's just got lots of things that you can search. So if you're interested in, any particular thing, you can search through these. I also really like, oh no, I clicked stop sharing. Stop. Share this. Merlot is really similar, and you can browse through the materials, learning exercises. So it gives all kinds of things. It's not just textbooks. Sometimes it's websites, sometimes it's activity ideas. I found, for example, on Merlot, there was this really, and people just kind of get to post on it. So you really do need to look around. There's this, I feel like there's this trade-off, right? Where when we have sort of built activities and like the textbooks, they give us a bunch of activities that are already ordered. It feels easier to use. And there's a little bit more like anarchist about the OER space, where it's a bit disorganized and it's like everywhere, and we're like trying to do all of this, trying to get it organized. But I actually think that that's sort of a feature of it, that it's a space where we can do modular things, where people can post any activities, then we can search. My favorite, and I don't know, sometimes I just like scroll through. It's not very often, but once in a while I'll scroll through Merlot and I'll look up a topic that I've been interested in. I don't know, that's part of my class. And I recently found this really amazing one done by a couple of biology professors at Oberlin, where they're teaching principles of osmosis through talking about personal lubrication. And they're tying it into some of the UN's health initiatives. So bringing together, I think it might be a sensor. So bringing together this sort of applicable piece, right, with this very core simple concept of osmosis, which is quite frankly very boring to learn with like our little traditional diagrams. So that was really neat. You'll find lots of things in the time that we have. Please do like look through you can find all of the links here, and this is really just getting you started. And hopefully if you need help accessing these slides to get the links, please let me know. The Allen Educational Materials Library, where I think Ashley has some of her stuff also with coding, is really great. But all of these are very, very a good place to start. As you are looking, a few things that I'll mention is thinking about citation and sharing conventions. For me, the OER space is really interesting because you're really sort of saying that, like, I want you all to use this, right? One of the sort of core things about OERs is this principle of retaining, reusing, revising, remixing, and redistributing. That we get to sort of share and iterate and build off of each other. So it's a little bit like, you know, last month my friend came to help me weed my garden, and she had this weird and very cool tool called a Haru tool. And I was like, whoa. And then now I want to use it. And I think that's kind of essentially what OER is. But that is all sort of like kind of interfacing with an academic, corporate sort of culture of where you get capital from even being like kind of an OER person, or you get intellectual property rights, these kinds of things. You know, for me, or when as faculty, like we are reviewed, right? Our tenure review processes are all tied to sort of like, did you create this thing and what does that mean? And so I sort of think of these Creative Commons licenses as like a sort of harm reduction approach, as these like two cultures around knowledge collide, which means it's really important to cite people. Most folks are going to have this license, which just says take whatever, do whatever, mess with it. You can change like the content, etc. I just want you to attribute it. But other folks might ask you not to change anything, right? Don't modify, and attribute, but please don't modify it when you use it. You can still use these things in class, and I'll show you an example. Let me step into my librarian hat for a second here. And I'll show you an example from my website here. Here we go. So in this lab, this is the one where I want them to use the zebrafinch data sets. So even though this whole course is a Creative Commons 4, meaning, you know, you can adapt, use it, etc. This one is not a Creative Commons. This one says that you can't do derivatives, so don't change anything. So I basically used Bill's whole data set as it is. I didn't modify anything. I didn't modify any of the worksheets or instructions, and I made sure to put that license in there. Which means that if one of you wanted to borrow something from this lab notebook, you would keep that same sort of thing. Does that make sense? So you can still use it, but you just want to use it as is. Okay. And then, any questions about that? That might be a little bit in the weeds for now. But I think I still just wanted to share it so that you're looking for what sorts of things people have on their materials as you're starting to adapt it or starting to use it. Yeah.
How do you, like, do people mark these licenses on their tools? they're available. Okay, so it's not like I have to search for it somewhere.
Okay. They usually mark them.
So then when you make your own, do you just like say which one it is, or do you have to go through some like process to?
No, you just say which one it is. Yeah, the website, if you're interested, I can link you to the website for that. It's really not, it's not like a regulated thing, but it does offer some.
The agreement then mostly?
Yeah, and there are some legal sort of protections for it. Other questions?
Where did you talked about it before, where did you find the Birdsong Fiji Image Day course material?
I found those through the faculty for undergraduate neuroscience ancient email listserv. Sorry, it's making me switch between like sharing screens and sharing windows. But if you go to this, like the lab 7, and you click this, it'll take you to Bill's website where he has all this material. And then there's actually an article from the Journal for Undergraduate Neuroscience Education where he talks about how to use it also. And everything is here. Other questions? Cool. Okay. So for the next like 25 minutes, you're welcome to search through things. I'm looking at Caitlin to see if it's okay that if you want to go sit over there.
And I stumbled into something like that in the research training during the summer.
Wrap us up in about a minute.
Yeah, like
Let's check it out. See, so it was sort of, I did it. Let's not, let's use it.
and then he was like, oh, yeah.
So,
I filled it out.
which to see that. I really liked your.
In the transition, right?
And then talk.
Now you know, when you play that at the same time.
Yeah, like I've written some small, like on Wikipedia. Science policy stuff. It was the one year. It's like a book, but I'm always like, how does it use me know? You know, like an editor or something or a publisher. Yeah. Like not a lot of people write for about you know what was like not a lot of scientists have to write stuff. Okay. There's a lot of empty stuff. Yeah, that's right. It's more like blah blah blah, and then yeah. It's really like this you need an open source. You have to kind of like Davis, yeah.
Like, all right, everyone. Let's get back together. We've got about 15 minutes left together. I'd love to hear what are some things that you discovered for your course. Other than that, there's dramatic diversity of organization, and it's just like a wild west out there.
We said that there ought to be a open site so that you can actually find things on open sites. Where you can search by, you know, what you really want.
Yep.
Just along those lines, I came here wanting to find sort of a discrete module I could drop into a lab or two. And I'm really pleased to see kind of how available those opportunities are.
Yeah, there are a lot, but you do have to do some digging for sure. Yeah.
How do you draw the line between like how much searching you're going to do for something versus just creating something yourself?
Oh, okay. How do you draw the line between searching for something and just creating something yourself? I don't know. That sounds like a.
I can easily see myself going down a rabbit hole, spending days combing through all of these.
I am a copy, do you have?
Yeah. I would say, I guess those are like factors that are individual decisions. I think like for a lot of folks, it's a little bit of like, if you're pre-tenure, for example, you might think about like what is valued at the institution. Like I said, there is that group doers that helps folks articulate what they're doing in the OER space for tenure and promotion stuff. But to the extent that that is valued, for example, I just underwent my pre-tenure review and my letter mentioned nothing about the open science and open education things that I do. But I did pass, so. But yeah, decide. And sometimes it's okay to decide that you'll do something that is not valued by your institution. I think that many OER folks might be those folks, actually. Yeah.
One thing is because you just mentioned, so doers, that DORS, this Open Educational Resource website coalition, consortium, one of those group of people. They have a really nice package for how to use OER for promotion and tenure, and how to get. They had a group that produced this really nice document on how to use it. And the other one is opened.org. It's a new initiative to kind of bring together all the open ed things so that you can search and actually find something.
I'm being introduced to this for the first time. Are the materials that you find on these different sites vetted somehow? Like, could I just create a lab and post it?
Technically, yes, but there are groups that these databases are trying to kind of do that a little bit. So if you look at Merlot, and I won't go to it, but on each of the individual things, it'll show you the like reviewer, a sort of informal reviewer rating, and then also the user ratings, and people can make comments as well.
A lot of times those labs are also published in a companion education journal, like Journal of Neuroscience Education. People build these modules and then they publish about them. So they've been through a peer review in those cases, and that's a good check.
I guess what I will say is, I think that many times OERs are an invitation for us to sort of examine what our own values are, or also to trust ourselves in many ways. Like you can look at it and see if it works well for your class and then change it if you don't think it's great. I think, this idea of like vetted, I don't necessarily know that I trust McGraw-Hill, which is a textbook publisher. But I can't speak for other fields. In neuro, OERs are usually pretty, I don't know, you kind of know the people, like Ashley's right here. Folks, they're always cited too, like who wrote them, etc., which you actually don't always know with traditional materials. So you can look up who did the thing. It is a real evolutionary biologist who wrote this chapter on evolutionary biology. So there's kind of a community accountability. Other things that people found. I watched Jackie play a game where she had to condition a dog to salivate to a bell, which was very neat. It seemed frustratingly difficult, actually. Anything else?
Okay. So it seems like we didn't necessarily like find like one thing for our course, but we got exposed to lots of different databases, things like that. That doers piece where it was for promotion and tenure, I do have that linked in my slides from my talk, which is also available on my website. But you can also, I don't know if you can search up doers actually, because it's got like a.
It worked. I didn't do the 3 thing and
Okay.
it still came up. Yeah.
Awesome. And then in the last couple of minutes, if you just pick like one of the activities or OER things that you found or were thinking of, I always like to do this thing where I ask myself, is that actually reflecting my values? Is that the things that I said were important in my class? Does it do that? Does the structure of that reflect what I'm trying to do? And if not, the cool thing about OERs is you can be like, interactive. You all talk with each other about that for a little bit. Okay, so what do we think? Does any hear from a couple of people about this sort of values alignment piece? What came up as you brought that back?
Maybe I can goof around there. Figure it out a little bit more.
Microscope slides fell off my ears. Anything?
I need to learn more.
Yeah, and maybe it'll be helpful for me to just normalize that. Like, I do think that the OER is a bit chaotic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is one of those things that, you know, that it's hard to search, or it's not something that you easily find in like a 20-minute session. But I hope you've had the experience where you found things that feel like it's expanded some of what you thought might be possible to do. Or, you know, like just even frameworks or ways of thinking about courses, this idea of moving away from traditional textbooks. Or I think it's cool that I've heard like your question where you're like, wait, what if I created these materials, right? Because I think in a lot of our STEM majors, we're so used to this idea of like inheriting or like teaching, getting a textbook and sort of framing it that way or things like that. I was in a really cool OER workshop with some geneticists that were really interested in trying to see if there were materials that sort of challenged Mendelian determinism, but they couldn't find any of those. So they decided that they're going to try and write some of their own. But, you know, so it's not just a place where we can give, I think I bring up this values piece quite a bit because it's not just that it's like not a place where we can find things that necessarily like content or cool or like teaching osmosis through personal lubricants. And it's like shocking and neat. It's also a place where we can find materials that helps recontextualize science in very important ways as we learn more about, you know, like history of science things or this kind of thing. This sort of like conserved way that we often introduce our students to the concepts, I think are ways that we can also that we can really remix. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I think that's all the time we have. It's been so nice to hear from you all. Thank you for engaging, working, doing things. Please continue to share your expertise with each other. All these materials are on my website, so you can link them, and they really, really are just a start. There are multiple databases, things to use. There are standalone sites. So definitely, it's more chaotic than it seemed from this workshop. Yep. And I can hang around if there are any questions, but I think we'll probably be securely ushered downstairs soon. Yay, thank you all. Thank you.